Peggy 16.
Hello and welcome everyone, Lionheart here, and that was the Total War Warhammer 2 announcement trailer. That's what they've been teasing, it's what all the countdowns and secret posts have been all alluding to. Total War Warhammer 2 is the next game in the series, in the trilogy of Total War Warhammer games that they've had planned from the very start, and they've announced that many times now, that it's a trilogy. So they're moving on to the second game straight away. I know many that prefer historical titles are a bit disappointed by this, really want to get into another historical title, and I love historical titles as much as the next Total War fan, and I would love to see another historical title, but it seems like they're pushing forward with Warhammer 2, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Obviously, it does suck if you're not into fantasy and, you know, you desperately want more historical stuff. That said, and before we get into kind of the meat of this video, in which I'll go through a Q&A that a Creative Assembly have put up on their forums, an interview as well, and I'll share my thoughts and impressions as we go through on all those features that are announced. Before we get stuck into that, I just want to cover the what the teams are working on forum post that Creative Assembly updated on their forum. Again, it's linked in the description, you can go check it out yourselves if you want to. But updated this in the middle of March. And for the historical team, the unannounced Total War title, they said their next major historical release is now in full production, so it's left pre-production. It's now in full production with game design locked and asset creation fully underway. The game retains the strong focus on character design that infused previous major releases, with the key personalities of the period in particular being an early priority for us now. As such, there are some vibrant and striking renders plastered around the studio, with eye-catching combat animations garnering some serious attention too. So they are working on the next historical title. They've been working on it for a while, you know, getting it all together, and it's gone into full production. So I don't know the timescale of that, but I imagine there's another year, maybe 2 years, before we see that next historical title. However, that said, they are working on some historical content in some form or another. If you look at that blog post right down the bottom, it says the Black Ops task team dash unannounced Total War title. And it says, as many of you have read in the last update, we've recently been conducting investigations into whether we can produce additional standalone follow-ups or DLC for release before the next major historical title in the series. Initial plans are promising, and now Jack Lusted and veteran Total War team members from Rome 2 and Attila, new content teams, have formed a new Total War team to investigate further. So that's them hinting at there might well be some form of historical content to tide us over until the next major historical title, which does seem like it's going to be a few more years away. I guess depending on, you know, development schedules and stuff, which we have no real information about. But yeah, they might go back to Rome 2 or Attila potentially, it seems, or just make a little mini standalone, maybe like a slightly bigger Age of Charlemagne sort of thing, perhaps, as either a standalone title or for either Rome 2 or Attila, to tide over those that are not fantasy, you know, gamers. They're not interested in Warhammer stuff, and they want to get stuck into more historical content. So there is hope there. So I appreciate that's maybe not ideal for those that aren't interested in fantasy and Warhammer right now, but at least it's something. And obviously, if I hear any, you know, whisperings of historical stuff, I'll be sure to share that with you guys as soon as possible. But anyway, let's get into what this video is about, which is finding out about Warhammer 2. What do we know so far? What does the Q&A tell us? My thoughts and impressions on that information. I will probably do a separate video with Moosey later on next week about some more lore-orientated stuff for these factions and what's been confirmed so far. I've got to admit, I think me and Moosey did a pretty good job with our Lizardmen confirmed speculation video the other week at nailing down most of what's been announced for Warhammer 2. But yes, let's get stuck in. So this, as I said, is a forum post on the Total War forums, posted by CA, just giving you guys a short Q&A to answer, I guess, they thought, you know, the most prominent questions that would come up. So, what is Total War Warhammer 2? It's the second in the trilogy and a sequel to the award-winning Total War Warhammer. Total War Warhammer 2 brings players a breathtaking new narrative campaign set across the vast continents of Lustria, Ulthuan, Naggaroth, and the Southlands. The Great Vortex campaign builds pace to culminate in a definitive and climactic endgame, an experience unlike any other Total War title to date. So that's, you know, suggesting, you know, the Great Vortex is what we see in the trailer, that the High Elves looks like they're trying to protect and stabilize, whereas the Dark Elves look like they want to claim it and use it for their own nefarious ends. And you can also check out the Steam page for Total Warhammer 2, and on that it suggests that, you know, there may well be stages of control over the Vortex, or whether you want to control and preserve the Vortex to keep the forces, the demonic forces of chaos at bay, or whether you want to destabilize that and potentially manipulate and try and use those forces of chaos, those demonic forces, to your own end. So I imagine Lizardmen and High Elves are going to want to stabilize and protect the Vortex, whereas Dark Elves and potentially Skaven Clan Pestilence may well want to just disrupt it to cause more chaos and destruction. So, leading on to how many races and lords can we expect? There'll be 4 playable races, each with 2 legendary lords for a total of 8 individual start positions. And this is really important because they mentioned this at the EGX Res talk. You will be able to, straight off the bat, once Warhammer 2 launches, to co-op campaign as the same faction, just with the legendary lords in obviously their own separate start positions. So they've now made that choice, which a lot of the community wanted for, you know, the first Warhammer game. It'll be interesting to see if they maybe go back and implement a lot of these features for the original kind of starting factions and all the others as well, by separating out the legendary lords. We've seen it with Bretonia and what have you, you know, making off lots of different factions so you can actually co-op if you want to. So Wood Elves as well was another prime example. And obviously having slightly different races and features there. But it'd be great to see, you know, the Empire Lords split up a little bit. Vampire counts it. I know they've got Von Carsteins now as well, but Dwarves as well, to, you know, definitely move Ungrim up to Kroq-gar and the Slayer Keep. But yeah, it means now that you will be able to co-op as the same faction, because all the Legendary Lords have their own unique start position. They'll never overlap for their start position. So that's great. I really like that. It's great that they've got that in there from the start. So obviously, the races that they've sort of shown off in that trailer are the High Elves, the Dark Elves, the Lizard Men, and then they say in this Q&A a fourth race yet to be revealed. But I mean, me and Moosey already thought it would be Clan Pestilence Skaven, and there is, right at the end of that trailer, you know, a pustule-filled rat that turns around with a very red beady eye, and, you know, many are already going, yeah, Skaven confirmed. So I would imagine Clan Pestilence are going to be that fourth faction. We'll talk about DLC and pre-ordering. Will there be another Warriors of Chaos thing happening when I take a look at the Eurogamer interview, because that's one of the things I want to take a look at that for, because there was some interesting talk about that. But anyway, each race is unique and will feel very different to play. Each has unique and iconic battlefield units, characters, monsters, war machines, and tactical strengths on the battlefield. In campaign, each has its own suite of unique campaign mechanics built around its backstory and lore in Warhammer Fantasy battles. In short, each race offers a very distinct way to play. And that's what we've seen with all the other factions and races that have been released by Creative Assembly. They've all had their caveats, their own unique systems of working. Some have felt a little bit similar, but most have had something distinct about them, and that's good to see that's carrying forward. As I said, when me and Moosey get together, we'll talk about what we think the mechanics and unique bits about their backstory and lore how that will interact and affect, you know, how these races are brought to life in the game. Before we move on to the next question in the Q&A, I just want to jump over to the Steam page, again, linked in the description, to briefly talk about the Legendary Lords that have already been announced. Kind of odd that they didn't actually put this in the Q&A, actually, on the forums. But on the Steam page, it talks about some of the key characters, which I assume will be the Legendary Lords for the various factions. So first off, Prince Tyrion, Defender of Ulthuan, guides the High Elves in their desperate efforts to stabilise the Vortex as it roils above their home continent. Now, as far as I'm aware, Tyrion isn't the High Elf shown in the trailer. Apparently that's Prince Tyrion's brother, Teclis. So it seems like we've got the two High Elf Legendary Lords there, possibly Teclis and Tyrion. So that'll be pretty interesting to see if that's how it plays out. For the Lizard Men, we see the great Slan Mage Priest Mazdamundi hovering above his Lizard Men army as they charge in there in the trailer as well. And others are suggesting that it's kroq-gar on the Carnosaur that comes charging on in earlier in the trailer as well. So that could potentially be both of the Lizard Men Legendary Lords done there too. In terms of the Dark Elves, we have the Witch King Malekith, who's obviously there in his crazy mask and horns and his sword, pointing it forward, and Dark Elves charging after him and what have you. So that seems like the kind of confirmed Legendary Lords so far. I mean, there's at least 3 that are shown on the Steam store page. Malekith, Mazdamundi, and Prince Tyrion is at least mentioned there. Possibly Teclis and kroq-gar also being thrown into the mix from what we can see in that trailer. So, what's with the Vortex in the announcement trailer? So it's already touched on that in the what is it about, and the Great Vortex campaign is its main grand campaign. The Great Vortex is a vast magical maelstrom that roils above the Isle of the Dead in the centre of Ulthuan, home continent of the High Elves. The Vortex was forged in a past age by a convocation of High Elf mages to drain the winds of magic from the world and blast a huge demonic invasion back to the realms of chaos from whence it came. It is a prominent part of Warhammer Fantasy Battles world and a unique feature on the Total War Warhammer 2 campaign map, and lies at the heart of the main campaign. So as I said, the stuff that's been said on the Steam page as well, it does seem to suggest that you'll be interacting with the Great Vortex, and that will have a fair few implications, I guess, buffs and bonuses if you control it, or I guess disruption and destruction on your lands if you don't. And I guess you'll be fighting against the AI to claim that as you go through. So how is Warhammer 2's campaign different from the first game? As the twin-tailed comet of Sotek made its recent journey across the skies, it caused the vortex to become dangerously unstable. Each of the 4 races has its own objective regarding this. Some wish to heal the Great Vortex and prevent calamity, others see opportunity in disrupting it. That said, no 2 races have precisely the same objectives, and they'll need to accomplish them in their own way. The campaign is therefore a race for control of the vortex, culminating in a cataclysmic series of endgame events. This is the first Total War game where the AI can beat you to the endgame objective. But the race for the Vortex isn't the be-all and end-all. You will still have to build and manage your empire, treat and betray your allies, research techs, develop settlements, all the usual Total War good stuff, with your unique race mechanics and objectives defining the specifics of your campaign. You'd still need to further your aims, but there will also be a greater focus on confounding or supporting the other races in theirs. So yeah, that's, as I said, going to be very interesting to see. I think it's going to be High Elves and Lizardmen that will want to obviously heal the Great Vortex and prevent calamity, and the Dark Elves and I assume the 4th race, which they haven't announced, but my speculation is that it's Clan Pestilent Skaven, will want to also disrupt it to just cause more chaos and disruption to the lands. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how I get. It seems like it's a very central role, a very narrative campaign to it, but obviously you can still do all the other Total War stuff around that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much that will draw your attention, and it's going to be interesting to see how this presents, a tough endgame, hopefully, against you in your campaign. But it's interesting to hear the AI can beat you here to get to that endgame objective, and I wonder, what does that mean if the AI beat you to it? It just ends the game, you lose? You can have a massive empire, but you'd lose because you haven't, protected the vortex or whatever. I wonder how that will actually... Will it just spawn loads of stacks and you'll just be annihilated? It'd be very interesting to see if especially on the harder difficulties, how tough it is to actually fend the AI off getting control of the vortex. How big is the Total War Warhammer 2 campaign map? The Vortex campaign map is roughly the same physical size as the first game, though there are approximately a third more conquerable land regions in Warhammer 2 campaign map than in Warhammer 1. These are spread across 4 continents separated by perilous seas. And we've also heard as well, I should mention, I don't know if they go further into this in the Q&A, but they have announced that regional occupation is done away with. You can conquer everywhere from the get-go. And that is massive. They trialed it with the first game, and then on launch there was a mod already available to get rid of it. I think it's still a kind of potentially a bone of contention within the community. I mean, share your thoughts on this, guys, down in the comment section. How do you feel about regional occupation? I bring this up in my Let's Plays every so often. It's interesting to hear people's opinions. In some respect, I kind of like it, but at the same point, Total War has always, to a degree, been, that sandbox experience, and putting a cap on what you can and can't do just seems to draw away from some of those kind of core values of what I believe is a great Total War experience. But many people, when they were speculating this, and me and Moosey weren't sure how, even if they even could do regional occupation. I wonder if that's going to have an impact and effect on the previous factions in Warhammer 1. And the reason why I'm mentioning what effect it's going to have on those is because there's a mega campaign feature, which we'll get to in a moment. So, what other new features can I expect? There's a host of new gameplay features, some of which are tied to specific narrative of the Vortex campaign, and some which will apply the huge combined campaign, which I said we'll talk about that mega campaign in a minute, and they'll be detailing more of this over the coming months. Do you need the original game to play Total Warhammer 2? No, you don't. This will be a standalone game, the second game in the Warhammer trilogy. However, if you do own the first game as well as Warhammer 2, you'll also be able to choose to play on a huge new combined campaign map. So owners of both games will have 3 large and different campaign maps to choose from. So, talking about the trilogy and that mega campaign, that massive combined campaign map. If you own both games, you will get 3 huge campaign maps. The original one featuring the Old World, which we currently have in Warhammer 1. The new one featuring the New World and the Vortex, which has been detailed in this forum post, what we've been discussing so far, so the Vortex campaign, which, as we said, should be the same physical size as the Warhammer 1 campaign map, but with a third more conquerable land regions on the campaign map. And you'll also get a combined campaign map featuring both of these areas, Old World and New World, joined together. If you own any DLC or free LC for Warhammer 1, like the Chaos Warriors, Wood Elves, Beastmen, or Lord packs, you'll also still have access to their unique narrative campaigns, of course, and will be able to play as those races in both the Old World campaign and the new combined campaign. So you'll be able to play as Karl Franz in the Grand campaign as it currently stands, but also in the new combined campaign as well. So what's going on with the Mega Combined campaign map exactly? So for owners of both Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, the first content release shortly after launch, free of course, so it'll be their first free LC content release, will be a vast combined campaign map representing the geographical areas of both games in a single map. So I imagine, straight off the bat, this is the largest Total War campaign map we've ever seen. I don't know, actually, maybe still thinking about Empire Total War, I wonder. There'll probably be more conquerable regions, even if the map was kind of physically bigger in Empire, there'll probably be more regions. But once we see the map, we'll know, basically. This will allow you to start epic campaigns as any owned race, including any DLC races you own. And this will be shortly after launch. They've said weeks and not months, and it will be their very first content release. And they've not said free content release. It will be free, but they've not said it, as in they'll do DLC first, then they'll do this. It's that they've said this will be their very first release. It will be free content, and it will be this massive mega combined campaign map. They've said that, people are asking why won't the combined campaign be available at launch, and they said the Vortex campaign with its dedicated narrative, unique features, mechanics and flavour is a big project in its own right, and the combined campaign will be truly vast as well. Each requires significant playtesting and balancing. This being the most complex Total War campaign they've released to date, they'd like to plan to have a short period of open beta testing just before they release it, which would require Warhammer 2 to be out for players to be familiar with all the new races and features, and obviously to have game Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2. So it looks like maybe on launch or a few days after, they'll announce an open beta for this combined campaign. There'll be probably a couple of weeks of testing that, getting the balancing right, and then they'll release it as their first bit of content, which will be free. And they've said, how will the third game add to this? And they've said, we will let you know in due course, but I would imagine, they'll just add those areas of the map to the grand, or rather mega combined campaign as well. Finally, moving on to a few other bits that were in the Q&A section, other stuff. Because there is this vast area of sea and perilous sea they've described within the Vortex Grand campaign, and obviously for this mega combined campaign as well, there'll be a fair bit of sea to travel around. Some people have wondered, will naval battles happen? CA have said it'll only be in auto-resolve. Warhammer Fantasy Battles is principally a game about land warfare. I mean, the tabletop, I don't think there was... Was there tabletop naval battles? I mean, I know there's the Man of War series as well, but I don't know how that interacted, if there was a tabletop version of that as such, or whether they were just models that they did to support the lore and fantasy. But yeah, they said that they're not doing naval battles, that it'll only be auto-resolve. And that's where they're choosing to focus their efforts. I guess it's also probably a budget constraint. They could, work on everything they have planned for this, or have to cut some of that out to have enough budget to make naval battles a thing as well. Have said that there are some new sea-related campaign features, and those will be detailed in the future. What are the plans for multiplayer? Each of the races in Total War Warhammer 2 will be playable in single and multiplayer campaign, plus custom and multiplayer battles. As the two legendary lords for each race all have their own unique campaign start positions, you'll be able to play a two-player co-op campaign as the same race. If you own both parts 1 and 2, you'll be able to play in multiplayer as any of the races you own. So if you have Warhammer 1 and all the DLC, you'll also be able to, and Warhammer 2, you'll be able to play from a full selective roster of all of those races against each other. So that sounds pretty darn cool too. Will there be an early adopter bonus or collector's edition? And they said they'll announce any news around those in due course. When's the release? And they said later in 2017. They'll announce a firm release date in due time as well. And will there be modding support from release? And they said, as with Warhammer 1, modding using the assembly kit and Steam Workshop support will both be available very shortly after launch. So I guess maybe around the same time they release the the mega combined campaign map as well. And finally, will it be released on Mac and Linux from release? And I said plans for Mac and Linux versions will be announced later in the year. I don't think they've actually released the first one on Mac yet, have they? But if I believe if anyone is doing that, that will be Feral Interactive that will be working on that, because they're the ones that have been porting Total War games over from Windows PC to Mac for the past few years. But I would imagine that surely got to come out soon now. It has nearly been a year since the PC launch. Finally, let's just jump over to the Eurogamer article. I won't go through the full interview, but there's just one or two things I wanted to pick out, one or two questions. So if you want to check out the full interview, then do go check it out. But it covers a fair few things we've already mentioned. So we're just going to take a look at two of the questions that were asked in the Eurogamer interview, but I would highly recommend you read the full thing. You'll learn a little bit more about the mechanics of the mega combined campaign as well. But yes, the first question actually I started with was, that was Skaven you were teasing at the end of your trailer, right? Creative Assembly respond with, what's a Skaven? And yeah, they don't exist. Aren't they something the people from Middenheim made up? They follow on from that, Eurogamer, by asking, fine, I get it, I had to ask, can we talk about the setting instead? So the Vortex shown in the trailer above is Ulthuan, right? Then given the other two races you've confirmed, it'll be Lustria and Naggaroth too. And CA respond by saying, that's right, there's also an area called the Southlands. And Eurogamer ask, who lives there? CA respond with, we're not ready to talk about that yet. And the Southlands, from a little bit of my own research, is where Clan Pestilence, they left Lustria and they settled up various outposts in the Southlands. I'm sure there's way more to it, and I'm probably doing the lore and the history a massive disservice by that, but a quick browse seems to confirm that indeed the fourth race will be Skaven. It will be Clan Pestilence Skaven, seeing as they are including the Southlands area as well. And finally, the other question that I wanted to pick out from this was leading back to, will there be any kind of pre-order incentives and things like that? Eurogame asks, strategy game interviews are always like this, we can't help it. You face some criticism with Warhammer 1 for the Chaos Warriors being offered as pre-order DLC. Has this changed your approach to the fourth race in Warhammer 2 that may or may not be Skaven? And they said, we can't talk about it yet, but what I will say is we do listen very carefully to what people think of the stuff that we do and the content we release. It will be appropriate, let's put it that way. So from that, what I'm thinking is I don't think they're going to do pre-order Skaven, because they've already said there will be 4 races in it at launch. So I think Skaven will be in there as another faction. They'll just announce it later. They're just holding back Skaven now to, you know, build up hype basically and mystery and intrigue around it. So there could well be a pre-order faction potentially, but the sense I'm getting from this is that they learned that people didn't appreciate the Warriors of Chaos being the faction, the playable faction that was designated as pre-order DLC, and they felt that a slightly more minor faction or just something bonus rather than something they felt was integral to the fantasy world and lore shouldn't be a pre-order incentive, that it should have either been part of the game already or whatever. So what I'm taking from that is that if they do a pre-order DLC, it will be, you know, it won't be a major faction, as many will argue, that should be playable. It might be, you know, a little bonus minor faction, or I don't know, maybe another legendary lord or something. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see until they reveal more. But anyway, that's why I'm going to kind of wrap up this video. I hope you found it useful, me going through that Q&A, sharing my thoughts as we go. I'm super excited for Warhammer 2. I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, as I said in my Lizardmen video, and I highly recommend if you haven't watched that already, do, because myself and Moosey talk a lot about the lore, about Lizardmen, a little bit about Dark Elves and High Elves and Skaven as well. And hopefully that will be useful to you guys too. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how this sets itself apart from the old world, what new challenges the new world offers, how that Vortex campaign plays out and offers a different experience to what we've seen before. And yeah, overall, just looking to play more Warhammer with the great variety to the races and units that we've seen already. Obviously, as I said at the start, you know, I would absolutely love to see another historical title, and I really can't wait to see what that Black Ops team headed up by Jack Lussard is up to, and by extension of that, to see what the next historical title is whenever we get a chance to see and hear about that as well. But until then, I'll still be enjoying Warhammer. I just hope that they've possibly had another look at sieges. I'm not expecting them to totally rework sieges in Warhammer 2 from Warhammer 1. I don't think that they would do that, but I hope that they just add more depth and layers to the sieges as they currently are. Just something to make me want to play sieges actually in Warhammer. You know, they've now had these map tools with people making fantastic custom settlements. I hope that they do that more, at least make the settlements more unique and stand out rather than the same kind of copy-paste, one-wall approach. Just add more layers going back, even if you still want this one channel going forward, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, what do you most want to see from Warhammer 2 that wasn't in Warhammer 1? What do you want to see most improved from Warhammer 1 into Warhammer 2? And yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and I'll do some more videos on Warhammer 2. I think we're going to be doing a warcast on this with Warrior Sparta, Alex the Rambler. Hopefully get Indie Pride on there to talk us through some of the lore and bits and pieces as well. And as I said, I'll do another video with Moosey later on this coming week too. But yes, hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and until the next one, don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Take pride and join the Legion. Check out my affiliates and sponsors, XMG, Greenman Gaming, and Overclockers UK. Until next time, ciao for now.